Hello, and welcome to your CNET 204 Week 5 video, Introduction to CSS3. And I meant to say Week 5 lecture video. Hey, there we go. So here's everything we're going to look at today. We're going to look at what CSS3 is, because you've presumably never used it before, how to implement it, what selectors are, what attributes are, and how color pickers work, and how colors work. So you learned last week about HTML5, and in fact you wrote your first web page in HTML5. HTML is for structuring your document. CSS is for stylizing your document. So it describes how the browser should render the HTML and display it. Anything to do with the presentation of the document is done with CSS, not HTML, which is pretty awesome. So you use CSS to do things like color the background and the text. You can resize pictures. You do all kinds of really cool things with CSS3. We're not going to get into some really advanced features, like you can actually do 3D animations and stuff like that. We're not doing that stuff. But we are going to do some really cool stuff. You're going to learn enough CSS to be able to resize pictures based on the size of the device, to resize your navigation bar that we're going to start building next week to fit the size of the device and to appear differently on a mobile device as opposed to a desktop or PC. And do all kinds of really cool things. But both of those things that I just described are what's referred to in industry as responsive design. So you're going to learn how to do that in this course. Now CSS can be applied in a couple different ways. In fact, 3 different ways. You can apply CSS inline within an HTML tag to apply a style uniquely just to that place within your HTML document. And that's not a great way of doing it. I've got a note on here that should be used sparingly, if at all. Why is that? Well, if you have one particular style that you want applied to every single tag on a website, and say you've only got 4 or 5 pages, that's not too horrible, right? You just go find every occurrence of that tag and apply that style or change that style. But it gets really difficult to maintain. So it's not a great way of doing things. Another method, which is a little bit better, but still not perfect, is internal. So you can have an internal style block within the header of your HTML document. It's a bit better than doing it as an inline, but it becomes very problematic when you've got a large website with multiple pages and you're trying to maintain a unique style, because you have to go into each page and make those changes. At least they're in the top of the document this time. You don't have to search through the whole document. But there's an even better way to do that, and that's just to straight up use an external CSS style sheet. And that's what we're going to do in this course. We're going to create a single style sheet. We can put all our CSS styling in that one document, that one file. We're going to link it to every single page we create on our website. And then you're good to go. You go to make changes in that one centralized place, and it affects every single page on your website. It doesn't matter if you have 2 pages. It doesn't matter if you have 200 pages. It's super easy to maintain. So we're going to focus on this because it's one of the best practices in industry. Now when it comes to creating an external style sheet, you can do this with any text editor, just like HTML. But we're already using Visual Studio Code, so we're going to use this for this purpose as well, because it's, well, all of the cool things that it did with HTML that you saw last week, with the highlighting and allowing us to push everything right to GitHub with that built in. We're going to do that exactly with this. Now, your file that you create should end in a .css extension, so you can identify what it is and what it does. And it's usually called style.css, but it doesn't have to be. In fact, you can actually use CSS to define separate unique styles for multiple different views on your website. Your standard view, mobile, and print, which is one that we don't talk about a lot. So you can have a separate style for how your website, if someone prints it for some reason, how it should be printed and how it should appear. You can actually have separate style sheets for each one of those and link all three of them. We're not going to do that. We're just going to do everything in one because we're doing some fairly intro stuff. But I want to throw that out there because this can get pretty complex. Hopefully you're with me so far. And as always, if you have any questions, write them down. I usually say this at the start, right? Write them down, bring them to me, ask in the lab. So selectors in CSS tell the browser what to apply the style to. They can be really simple, just like the name of a tag that you want to apply it to. They can also be a bit more complex, like styling a tag but only if it's a child item of another tag, or a tag with a particular ID or class, or in fact just a particular ID and class even. The following I've got on the screen here is an example of using the body selector. So anything we put in between these curly braces will apply to the body tag. And you're going to learn some more complex selectors in Lab 7, but we're going to start with some fairly simple ones. So you write the name of the tag, you write your opening curly brace, you write your closing curly brace, and then your styling goes right in the middle, and usually you indent it once. But you don't have to. Technically, you could do it all in one block, on one line, separated by a semicolon for each statement. I don't recommend that because it's kind of ugly to look at, and it gets really difficult to troubleshoot problems when things don't work. Incidentally, things are going to break in CSS because if you don't spell something correctly or you miss a semicolon, that's one of the most common things, it just doesn't work. And for debugging tools, we'll see in the lab there's a validator through the W3C that we can use. But that's kind of the frustrating thing with CSS. You're trying to apply something, it's just not working, you're refreshing the page 100 times. Maybe you got an error somewhere. It's hard to find. It doesn't give you an error. Now those selectors have attributes. Attributes are just the things you want to change the appearance of. And attributes have values, the options that you want to change for those particular attributes. Every selector has a unique subset of different attributes and values that can be applied to it. And don't memorize these. I'll show you a great resource for these. But here's an example of how to do it. The following is just going to set the body background color to black, which is not a great color. Well, it could be. I mean, this is black, right? You just have to stylize the whole rest of your page accordingly. So we've got our body selector, like you saw on the previous slide, and we've got background color, colon, a pound, and 6 zeros. So that's a hexadecimal color code that we're going to look at in a minute. And that's actually the hex color code for black. But something important I want to point out here is each statement, so this is a statement, we've got our attribute, we've got its value, and it ends in a semicolon. Every single one must end in a semicolon. Now when it comes to attributes and values that can be applied to different tags, you don't need to memorize them all. In fact, don't even try to memorize them all. There's an awesome resource provided by W3 Schools, w3schools.com, for free. So why wouldn't you use that? And the lab is going to link to that in a few places. Now when it comes to colors, there's a couple different ways you can apply them in CSS3. We're going to use the 6-digit hexadecimal color codes. So these color codes they always begin with a pound, they end with a semicolon because that's the end of the statement, and they're made up of 6 digits which are grouped into 3 categories respectively. The first 2 represent the amount of red, the second 2 green, the last 2 blue. And you can play around with these, kind of like playing with watercolors. Or you can use a color picker through W3 Schools. There's one available. There's also one built into Visual Studio Code, which is pretty great. two useful values that you might want to know are black and white. Black is the absence of all color, right? So that's represented as 6 zeros. White is every color combined. So that's 6 Fs. Hopefully I have 6 Fs on the slide. I think I do. Yeah, it looks like I do. But you don't need to worry about memorizing these. You've got to know where to look up the information when you need it. I use color pickers all the time. It's a good thing. That's crazy, a 10-minute video. So in Lab 5, we're already halfway through the lab content? Really? We're already halfway through the lab content. That surprised me. It should surprise you. In Lab 5, you're going to create an external style sheet. You're going to learn some introductory CSS, and I'm going to go through this with you in the next video. We're going to apply CSS using that external style sheet, and we're going to learn some colors. Just some really basic stuff. Next week, in Lab 6, you're going to create the HTML portion, or HTML framework, for a navigation bar that we're going to layer on in Lab 7, all the CSS for. And by the end of Lab 7, you're going to have a mobile-friendly, responsive navigation bar that resizes based on the side of your device. And it's a handy thing to set up first, because then we can just keep adding pages and build out our navigation bar. It's going to be awesome. But for now, let's dive into some introduction to your CSS in the next video. Take care. Be safe. I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.